Hi, I'm Rachel Fenn, and I'm delighted to be presenting the research from End Sexism in Schools, an organisation of which I am a founding member, on gender bias in the English curriculum at Key Stage 3. The background of this campaign is it's a grassroots campaign made up of volunteers, largely people who are involved in education in some way, but also parents and other interested professionals. The focus that we have as a group is ending sexism in schools through a holistic look at the whole school experience. So our focus, unlike a lot of other organisations who are working in this area, is not just looking at PSHCE or RSE, which is relationships and sex education, but on whole curriculum change, looking at what is actually taught in our classrooms in terms of the content of the curriculum, as well as how male and female teachers are treated differently, why that is, and what impact that has on students. We think it's incredibly important to make the connection between the invisibility of women in the curriculum itself and sexual harassment and sexism. We believe that the fact that boys and girls are consistently taught in classrooms that it is only males' voices, experiences, achievements, perspectives that are important, which leads to the attitude that women are less important, women are worthy of less respect, and therefore can be treated in the way that we know that they are treated through looking at the Everybody's Invited website, and also Ofsted's research into the male sense of superiority in schools on the back of that, and also looking at UK Feminista and the National Education Union's report in 2017 on sexism in schools, which showed that well over 2/3 of female students have experienced sexual harassment in schools. It's not good enough, and it's incredibly disappointing. And the government's response to that has been to create a new relationships and sex education curriculum that came into force in 2020. However, the attitude that relationships and sex education is going to prevent sexist attitudes in schools is like the equivalent of giving someone a paracetamol to cure the pain that's caused by cancer. You know, we're not getting to the actual disease here, we're just masking the symptoms, which is why we believe that challenging the content of the curriculum is crucial to ending sexism in society as a whole. So our first project has been to research gender bias in the English curriculum at Key Stage 3. We chose English largely because it's one of the only subjects where teachers have free reign of in what they teach. It's also easy to capture the information in a way that in other subjects it isn't. You know, you're either teaching a book by a female author or you're not, whereas in other subjects it can be a little bit more difficult to work out the exact percentage of female-male content coverage. So the methodology. The Key Stage 3 curriculum is not prescribed for English, as I just said. So there are no set texts apart from Shakespeare. So each school has a unique curriculum, which means that there isn't a kind of place that you can go to find out this information. Each school has to be researched individually. And this research has never been done before. This is the first time anyone has ever attempted to get a picture of what's actually being taught in Key Stage 3 in schools. It's possible to get this data for Key Stage 4 because you can ask the exam boards, but Key Stage 3 is much more challenging from that perspective. So we set up a crowd research campaign and a crowd research system, which is where volunteers come together to do research, and then that research is combined to come up with the whole data. We allocated volunteers to research schools in each local education authority area across England. We're only researching England and not Wales and Scotland, simply because we didn't have enough people to do that. That's something that we would be interested in doing further at another date, or hearing from people who would be interested in doing that research for us. The first port of call to get the data was to go to school websites. It is a mandatory requirement for schools to publish their curriculum on their websites, but they don't have to do it in any particular detail. So where that information on the actual text taught was not available on school websites, we then went on to send freedom of information requests to get the data from the schools. All the data was entered into a Google form that fed into a secure master spreadsheet, which means that the data is easy to collate and extract. And we also wanted to get qualitative data alongside the quantitative. So we've conducted social media polls of teachers, we've sent out questionnaires, and we've also conducted interviews, which has enabled us to get more discursive data from teachers, pupils and school leaders about their experiences of English and gender bias. So the initial findings, I want to make it clear that we haven't yet finished the project. We've got a goal of researching a third of the schools in England. We're almost there, but we're not finishing this until the end of September. And I'm recording this before the end of September, so we're almost there, but not quite. So these findings are yet to be finalised, but so far in Year 7, only 60 out of 800 schools guaranteed that pupils would be taught a whole text by a female author. In Year 8, that figure is slightly more, 65 out of 800, and in Year 9, 52 out of 800. Women are 50% of the population, so we would be much more happy if those figures were more likely 400 out of all of those schools, but there we are. Across the whole of Key Stage 3, less than 1% of students are ever taught a whole play by a female playwright, which is a shocking statistic and is largely because of the prevalence of Shakespeare as the only dramatist who's taught in schools, which is another issue that we're going to look into. Overall, this means that over 75% of all school children in England are never taught a whole text by a female author in their English lessons across the whole of the 3 years of their Key Stage 3 education. And we find that shocking and something that we think urgently needs to change. Looking at the male-female perspectives in novels, so over 2,000 individual novels have been collated as being taught in schools at Key Stage 3, which again shows how unique each school's curriculum is. Even though there are plenty of novels that are taught multiple times across schools, there is still a huge variety. 84% of all of those novels taught had a male protagonist and a male narrative voice. The novels taught by female authors show roughly a 60-40 split in female-male protagonists. So female authors are still writing a lot of novels from a male perspective, which is a wider question that we're interested in finding more about, as in, why do female authors feel they have to write from male perspectives in a way that male writers clearly don't feel they need to write from the perspective of female authors, because only 2% of novels written by male authors have a female protagonist. So it's really obvious from these statistics that the vast majority of novels being taught in our schools are presenting a male perspective, a male viewpoint, and reinforcing that idea that it is only male viewpoints and male voices that are important and that matter and are worthy of discussion. The most popular texts taught, we're looking at the top 5 most popular here, are all by male authors, and they all feature male protagonists. So the most popular is Of Mice and Men, followed by Christmas Carol and Animal Farm, and then Lord of the Flies and The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas. And what's interesting is that this most popular text, Of Mice and Men, which is by far the most popular across Key Stage 3, has one female character who's consistently referred to in misogynistic terms. She's murdered by the male character Lenny, and then she's blamed for her own murder due to her flirtatious behaviour and her choice of clothing. And at the end of the novel, all of the sympathy is with Lenny, who murders her, rather than with Curly's wife herself, who is the character. And also, she obviously doesn't even have her own name. She's just referred to by her relationship to her husband. So this very troubling text that looks at women in society in a highly misogynistic way is considered by a huge number of English teachers to be worthy of study. I'm an English teacher myself. I've taught it myself. And I've always taught it through the lens of looking at the misogyny in the novel. But our argument is, why teach a novel like this in order to talk about misogyny when you could just teach a novel by a woman instead? So intersectionality is something else that we have looked at. Our research shows that female writers in the curriculum are largely relegated to extracts and poetry. And this is largely where we also found writers of colour being featured in the curriculum. So we feel that not teaching whole text by either women or writers of colour really reinforces white and patriarchal dominance in our classrooms. If you're teaching an extract or a poem, you're only going to spend a lesson or part of a lesson on teaching it. Whereas when you're teaching a whole text, a novel or a play, you're going to be spending weeks on that text. So if you're only doing bits and bobs of writing by women or writers of colour, it just sends that clear message to pupils that the writing of women and people of colour is less important, it's less valid, and it's less worthy of study. What we did find, though, that where whole texts were taught by writers of colour, these were overwhelmingly written by women. So on average, around 20% of the female authors taught are women of colour. But the number of male writers of colour, it was such a small number, we couldn't even really make it into a statistic. So this suggests that while some schools are willing to improve the diversity of their English curricula, they're not doing this by changing the dominance of white male authored texts. It's women who are making room for diversity rather than men. So what's next? We are finishing our data gathering at the end of September, as I said, after which we will write an academic report to be published in educational journals, raising awareness of gender bias in the English curriculum. We are currently forming relationships with female authors to develop detailed schemes of work with author content to provide to teachers free of charge, because our qualitative research shows us that teachers do want to change what they're teaching. They are aware of gender bias, but a lot of the time it's down to time. They don't have time to replan their curriculum. So we want to make this as easy for them as possible. We want to be able to provide the solution as well as the data. And further to that, another issue that we found when doing qualitative research was that teachers couldn't afford to replace class texts of books, which is why the same texts are being taught year after year. So we are also forming relationships with publishers to provide free class texts of works by female authors, so that we can offer schools who want to change their curriculum the opportunity to do that without needing to allocate any budget to it at all. We are forming further subgroups of expert volunteers to enable us to conduct research and create resources for other curriculum subjects too. So our plan is to get to the stage where we can provide data, but also materials for every single subject area in the curriculum to make meaningful changes to what they're teaching. So that's our plan. We need more volunteers to help us do this. If you have been intrigued by what I've presented today, if you want to get involved, we are looking for people to help us with everything from subject expertise and research to IT, PR, marketing, fundraising, campaigning, whatever you can offer, we are looking for your skills. There is no need for a regular commitment. You can offer as much or as little of your time as you like. We tend to have monthly meetings, but they're not mandatory to attend. And we're just basically looking for anybody who wants to help us in any way. If you would like to help us, please do contact us on endsexisminschools@gmail.com or visit our website, which is www.endsexisminschools.wordpress.com. We also have a Twitter account, which is @NoSchoolSexism, and we would love it if you could follow us. We update that regularly. Thank you so much for your time in listening. I hope that you found this really interesting, and I look forward to hearing from many of you who might like to get involved.